So as I did in a previous review, I've played through the original Spell Force 3. So Spell Force Cell Harvest is sort of an expansion. Initially, I thought it would be a DLC, but it's actually a fully standalone expansion upon the first Spell Force. So Spell Force came out in 2017, and Soul Harvest was released in 2019. In general, in my previous review, I noted that I was pleasantly surprised by what I was experiencing. Arguably, probably because I hadn't played any serious form of base building game in quite some time, and that Spellforce in general is quite reminiscent of Warcraft, especially the very early titles that were in the early 2000s, which I also have fond memories of. So I've spent about 100 hours playing Spellforce in total. So about 30 of those hours have come in from playing Soul Harvest, which we will be briefly looking through now. Basically, that suggests that there's quite a lot of content in this game immediately. So if you are looking to spend some time just enjoying playing a solid base building game, I can definitely recommend Soul Harvest. But I want to go over some of the themes in the game just so I can provide some clarity. So first, we will note the story. So the way the story is communicated in Soul Harvest is through just the voice-over narrations that you will experience while waiting during load screens. There are several letters, quite a few letters sprinkled throughout the universe that you can read. I mean, I personally didn't, but they're there for reading. But most of the story will come through your engagement with the campaign as you encounter new characters, journey through new maps, and complete new missions. All of this is connected together through a central narrative. So one part of this narrative is what is called the God of Light. The thing is, there are some strong connections between Soul Harvest and the previous Spell Force 3, especially narrative-wise, which will sort of, I think, the player needs to have some knowledge of if he or she wishes to play this game. It's not you don't have to have that knowledge, but that knowledge will definitely help. And in one area is where the God of Light is concerned. So the basic idea is that the God of Light is sort of a destructive being, or it's presented as this early on in the game, and that they are sort of factions that are trying to bring this being into the world. And basically, these characters trying to do that are called the Corrupted. So there are 4 Corrupted in total. The major one that you will be facing in this game is called the Masked Woman. She is the major force who's trying to release the God of Light into the world in order to bring about the world's end. There's also a connection here to the previous Spell Force in the fact that Rhonda Lacane from the first game is also noted now to be one of these corrupted. But he's without spoiling anything about the earlier Spell Force, you do deal with Rhonda Lacane in the way that you do in that game. So basically, the corrupted, particularly the masked woman, steal the souls of humans, dwarves, and elves, and uses these souls to sort of power a portal through which she can bring the God of Light into the world. So this is the basic premise of the story, and you will find your home base in Greykeep. In this game, you're playing not as Tahar from the first game, but rather as a soldier called General Erev. So basically, this will be the hero of your party. You'll have your base of operations at a big sort of castle called Greykeep. And then this is the location of the Queen of Io, or Northander, the fictional country kingdom that you are trying to save. This queen will send you out on missions across Northander to try and save the kingdom. and to offset the God of Light or its entrance into the world. A major theme in this game is also a memory that Erev has. So as I said, Erev is a character you will be playing as, and immediately you'll notice that he is being presented as quite a disgraced figure and someone living with significant regret of a certain event that happened not long earlier. It's also, just speaking about chronology, worth noting that this Soul Harvest takes place just a few years after the events of Spellforce 3 and the events of Tar. But anyway, the General Erev is living through quite a bit of regret, and there seems to be some form of repressing of this memory, and that gradually it unfolds as you play the campaign. So the way this happens is that that the memories manifest, but you actually end up playing through the memories in a sort of a small map. And these memories try to depict the events that have caused a General Erev or this trauma. These are interesting parts of the campaign, but I found it quite boring because there's not much action to be had in these memories, and ultimately I wanted to play Spellforce Soul Harvest for the action. So the fewer the maps that take emphasis off the action, the better for me in the long run. It's also worth noting that I played Soul Harvest on hard difficulty, but I'll have some more to say about that shortly. Also, as one would have been accustomed to having played the previous title, there are several characters or heroes that are playable in Spellforce Soul Harvest. I counted a total of 8. Some of these heroes will be supporting characters from the earlier title, but there are also several new heroes that you can choose from. I tended to stick with the Elven Archer Arya. She's from the first game, and I particularly enjoyed her in my party of 4 heroes. You only can use 4 at a time because of some of her healing abilities and spells. And there are some other characters who will appear from the previous game in Soul Harvest, and they'll appear not as playable characters, but as characters in the general story. And it's worth noting that they're not always necessarily on your side. So, I mean, I can leave that to the player to discover. Each character and each NPC in the game that you will encounter are voice acted. So I found this quite good in the sense of the clarity, that the voice acting is very clear. The voice acting is also well done in the terms of selectivity. So a dwarf sounds like a dwarf, a human sounds like a human, and so on. The voice acting is mostly good, but there are times when the voice acting strikes me as a bit off, especially the main character, General Erev, when he has slight elevations of voice, and some of it's quite strange. Like, basically the way you engage with other characters is that you talk to them, and then like you can actually select what you want to say from a list of sayings or sentences. And sometimes if you select these sentences in certain orders, it can jump quite strangely from voice elevation. So at one point you could begin a conversation with General Erev having a very calm demeanor, or rather say a very angry or agitated demeanor, where his voice is clearly agitated, and then the very next prompt you select is him being very calm and collected. And this just seemed quite inconsistent, but again, not a massive dilemma. So there are 2 major mission types in Spellforce Soul Harvest, also as was the formula in the previous Spellforce. So basically solo missions and base building missions. Okay, so almost all the missions can be split into these 2. So solo missions are just when you're playing as General Erev and you can select 3 other heroes in a party. In these solo missions, you won't have any other forces or army with you, or like there won't be any base building. It'll just be you on a solo mission. And these can be anything from fighting, or from taking bounties on certain characters, to just progress in the story. And these aren't too difficult because it's just the four of you. The game knows it can't just swamp you in enemies, so there shouldn't be too much of a problem. But I did find that some of the solo missions, especially on hard difficulty, did uh, give me quite a challenge at times, especially early on in the game. And then the other mission pattern or structure of the game is base building. So this is probably what the game will be known primarily for. So the idea is that you harvest resources and from different resource reservoirs, so to speak, from the game, and you use these from a map, and you use these to gradually build up a village and then an army. So you build structures. You might need resources like stone or iron to build structures. You need to somehow procure food so you can build up an army. And basically, each building will have slots for workers that you can attach. And the more workers you allocate and attach to these specific buildings, the quicker resources will be gathered and the quicker soldiers can be trained. So ultimately, the goal of the base building mission design is simply to expand your territory, right? And you'll be facing an enemy on these maps, and you and the enemy will be vying for new territory, which come in the form of outposts that can be conquered to add a new zone to your little growing empire. The ultimate goal then is not only to expand, but then to build an army powerful enough to overcome the enemy, whoever you're fighting, and destroy their capital building. Once you've done that, then that's a mission success, and you go on to your next mission. And there is quite a bit of variety in Spellforce generally, and this reflects in Soul Harvest 2. So you have various capital cities. You have like basic map designs. So you have capital cities. What particularly, and some of these will stick out for me. The Dwarven Mine is a map that stuck out quite nicely. It's also a base building rather than a solo mission in the game. And it was just very interesting the way how the designers conceived or produced this conceptualization of what a dwarven mine would look like. Another map that's quite memorable is the Dark Elven City, which is located in a large cavern. For some reason, Spellforce has quite an obsession with caves. You'll be venturing through a lot of caves in this game, not only on the main sort of story, but also on side quests. There are also a variety of races that are included. So dwarves, dark elves, humans, and orcs. In fact, I would think the orcs are quite a large and noticeable weakness in the game. Not as a faction, but how they have been included. They take up such little space of the main story of any of the side missions that they seem quite a bit of an afterthought, which I found quite disappointing because I really like the orcs. And my understanding is that the other expansion, Fallen Guards, brings the orcs into much more focus in that campaign, which I'm also looking forward to playing. But the basic idea is that the orcs are underutilized, which is unfortunate. It would have been better just for the orcs to have been omitted entirely from this game and got the emphasis they deserve in Fallen Gods. And then also you have a variety of items, so armors, weapons, and jewelry. Again, I didn't find there to be much of an improvement on the previous Spellforce. By the end of my time playing, as I said, after 30 hours, most of my armor kit on my heroes or at least my four major heroes, were epic sort of category of armor. There's about 4 or 5 categories of armor, and epic is at the top, and then you have blue and purple and so on going down the ladder. The weapons, they also are standard and not much different from the previous game. So if I can remember, I had a large two-handed club. You have other forms of two-handed weapons which you can use, such as pole arms and large swords. If you prefer a character to be sort of a distant offensive character, there are crossbows and bows to use. There's also a strong magical component in the form of scepters and staves. There's also jewelry, largely in the form of trinkets and rings. So these have a few little benefits. They also come in the variety of categories. So you have epic again, and then all the way down to white category items. And these things can add just a bit of extra resilience and armor to a bit of more attack power to increased health, and so on. Again, standard, same as the previous game. So if you're expecting any improvements here, it will disappoint. I would say the same with the skill tree. So there are 9 skill trees now. In the previous game, there were 7. But the other 7 are left largely unchanged. It's nothing new, and you will instantly recognize it, especially if you play in a similar sort of class of character in Soul Harvest. So I like warriors to sort of battle up front, and then I have my archers and crossbow heroes at the back. But you'll immediately recognize the similarities or the exact sameness of the skill trees in these sort of areas, or these forms of skill trees. I didn't really use the other 2 new ones. I didn't find them very relevant. Normally I split up with two heavy characters up front, and then, as I said, 2 distant characters at the back. I think if I had to say something that I really enjoyed so far about Spellforce is the excitement that it brings. So every sort of new map I always found to be so exciting. It to be so exciting to actually begin exploring this map, because as you explore, you fight your enemies, you slowly upgrade your characters, sort of their levels. You find new sort of items and treasures throughout the maps, and it's hard to deny that these maps are very intricate. They're quite beautiful at times to look at. You can clearly see the game designers and creators went to great depths to actually produce these maps. So speaking about some of the cons of Spellforce, okay, it's definitely not all perfect. So as I said, I played the game on hard, and especially at the start of the game, or in the first half of the game, like, I found it to be quite challenging, especially as lower level. However, as the game went on and I upgraded my characters, and I found new armor, better weapons, and so on, I found the game to start to become very easy there in most areas. And this would also, as I'll speak about now, include the boss battles at the end. But if I had to pinpoint an area which I think could have been maybe used more in this game, and that I found difficult no matter what level I was, were sort of the side missions. So some missions that you could pick up at Greykeep are sort of bounties. So you pick up bounties on these figures called Reavers, and these Reavers can be anything, or mostly they're barbarian figures or outlaw figures that are put on certain maps that you'll go to, and they'll be surrounded by little minions who are quite easy to dispatch, especially as you level up. But the Reavers themselves are always a very tough encounter, just in terms of the how much health they have, and how much and the certain abilities and spells and skills that they have. So always you'll need your 4 characters to be at their best and to use them in the best possible way to actually overcome these sort of Reavers. And just speaking about the 4 characters, you will in this game find your 4 favorite. Okay, so I mean, you always have to have General Arev as the main character that you're acting as in the party. So you just need to determine what 3 others you'll want, and very soon you'll find which combination you prefer, or what combination, or how you'd like these characters to play on the map. And that's very rewarding. So very soon you will sort of figure out a combo that you can use between using these figures just for maximum damage and maximum effect. And it almost becomes very strategic, almost like a sports team, if you will. And that's very enjoyable. As I said, loading screens, lots of loading screens in Spell Force. Fortunately, this has made the pains made lesser in the sense that there are voice-over narrations while you're watching loading screens, and whoever did this voice-over narration narrative has done a very good job because the writing behind it is exceptional, very descriptive, very clear and succinct, and could have been put into a novel of any sort of author of high skill and caliber. I already noted the development. There's a lack of development in certain areas. I noted like the armor and the trinkets and things, but also not much in the sense of buildings. The buildings that you construct with whichever sort of race you choose is largely the same as the previous Spell Force. If there has been any differences added here, I certainly didn't notice them. Also, just noted how the skill tree is also quite similar, and the orcs were sort of an afterthought added to Spellforce Soul Harvest. I think I won't spoil much, but on the last point, and I won't spoil or give any details, is that I found the final boss battles to be very disappointing. So I mean battles in the plural because these aren't because these come. Just to spoil one detail, which is not much of a spoiler, is that these come in waves. Okay, so bosses just spawn sort of certain units that come in waves, and you just beat those units. And that's often how it progresses. There's not much beyond a boss who has a large health pool and quite a strong attack power and spell system, and who sort of spawns in smaller minion characters. I mean, that's the general sort of boss that you'll fight in this game. And again, found that very disappointing. Didn't find it very challenging at all. I didn't die on any of the bosses. And also, it's nothing special, nothing memorable. Like, there's no sort of strategic need beyond perhaps just running in circles, healing my characters in these battles. So I think more innovation on behalf of the game designers could have been used here just to make it more memorable. And that's largely how I would review and sum up Soul Harvest in 25 minutes or so. I will say it's good. Beyond these sort of disappointments in terms of boss battles and the sort of omission of the orcs, or the already lack of inclusion of the orcs, Spellforce is good. I can recommend it. I can also just recommend it because of the amount of content there is here. So even if you're sort of averagely interested in base building sort of character RPG sort of games, I would suggest buy it. And I'm pretty sure you could find it on a special, especially since it's about 3 years old now. That is, I'm referring to Soul Harvest, and 2 years, and in 2017 you have Spell Force 3, which I'm pretty sure you can get on a deal. So I can recommend it.